Hello everybody and welcome to this SUPboarder comparison review where we are taking a look at the Wedge, the Spice and the Pro from Starboard SUP. We're going to be looking at the Wedge, the Spice and the Pro, giving you our feedback on how these boards compare and how they ride in the surf. And then we're also going to take a look at the design elements for each board, who these boards are going to suit, and lastly, one of the biggest takeaways from when we were surfing it is the different wave types that you need to be considering before you purchase the board, and also what boards are going to work in certain types of conditions. Starting off with the Wedge, this is definitely your wider and more stable board for SUP surfing. You can find these boards range from 8 feet long right up to 11 feet 2 in length, and they're all at 32 inches of width. Then we move on to the Spice, which blends those elements of stability from the Wedge and the performance from the Pro. The sizes range from 6 feet 9 inches long right up to 9 feet 3 and come in a variety of different widths. And then looking at the Starboard Pro, it's definitely your high performance shape, so those riders looking to get really radical. Those boards range from 6 feet 10 in length right up to 9 feet in length. Now the size of boards that we have in the video today, we have the 8 feet by 32 inch Wedge, the 711 by 29 inch wide Spice, and the 710 by 28 inch wide Pro. Just because we have these smaller sizes doesn't mean that the information in this video doesn't apply to the whole range. It certainly does. So all of the takeaways from this video today, you can apply it to those bigger sizes if you are that heavier rider or that beginner paddler looking for a longer or bigger board. You notice that we have a mix of different constructions here in the studio today. Let me go through those for you right now. You can see that we have the white colored boards in front of us with the Wedge and the Pro. Now these are the limited series construction from Starboard. It's a really affordable yet really strong construction. Starboard used twin stringers for the deck and bottom to reinforce the strength, and there's sustainable pine used under the standing area to help with strength and durability as well. It does have a nose reinforcement and an extra glass rail band too. In the Spice behind me here, we have the blue carbon construction. This is their best value full carbon construction. It's a full carbon wrap plus twin stringers for reinforcement and pine under the standing area, and that blends that performance and durability. What's missing in this video is this starlight construction, and that's only found in the Wedge range. I will let you know that the weights and the prices do change between the different constructions. For the limited series construction, you'll find these boards retailing starting around £1,199, and then moving up to the blue carbon construction, which retails for £1,999. £199. Do make sure you check your local shops and retailers for your pricing on the size of the board and also in your local currency as well. So let's take a quick look at the fittings that we find on each of the boards. You notice that there is a different deck pad for each of the constructions. The limited series has a hexagonal deck pad, still a diamond groove though, so it gives you really great grip. That feeds back into a raised kicker with a bump in the middle as well for your back foot. Whereas on the blue carbon construction, you get that almost full length deck pad that consists of a diamond groove crocodile skin, along with the similar deck pad being a raised kicker at the back with that bump in the middle too. We'll also notice that we have the leashing point behind the tail pad. The handles in the board are really comfortable, nice big handles, easy to carry the board. Flipping the board over, and all of these boards in the smaller sizes in the range come with a 5-fin option. However, make sure you do check the larger sizes because some of the Wedge range does only come as a thruster or a 2+1 setup. The fins we got with the 8 feet Wedge was a quad 4.7 inch size side fins in the front and 4.5 inch size side fins in the back. These are the armor core fins. They are very eco-friendly. The core of the fin uses armor cell, which is made of 100% recycled plastic bottles, and the fins are built with recyclable epoxy resin. If we move on to the Starboard Spice, we'll notice that we get a carbon version of the quad fin, still the same size, 4.7 fronts and 4.5 rears. The carbon is the 3K pre-impregnated carbon. You'll find that these fins also do float. And then looking at the Starboard Pro that we had on test, this comes standard as a 2+1 setup, a 120 center fin, and a 4.7 inch size side fins in that armor core construction as well. Let's start off by going through some of the similarities that we find on these boards to do with the design elements. And one of the biggest things that stand out is that the bottom shapes are very similar across all 3 boards. We'll have a very slight single concave throughout the nose. This creates lift when taking off on the wave and directs the water flow toward the tail. Then it moves back into a double concave in the middle of the board, and that allows for great control from the midsection when surfing, and then moves into a slight V or rolled V out through the tail, which again enhances the sensitivity and rolling from rail to rail with ease throughout your turns. One other thing that we notice is the same across these sizes of boards in the ranges is their tail width. So for each board, they have an 18-inch tail width, and I thought that was quite amazing because considering we have a 32-inch wide Wedge that moves back into an 18-inch wide tail, that is pretty impressive. And then also the 28-inch wide Pro moves back into that same 18-inch tail. Do check the specs on the Starboard website though, because as you move up in sizes or down, it does change the tail widths across the similar sizes of each range. Now, where these boards differ the most is in their outline shape. As you'll notice, the Wedge is quite a wide board. It really holds its width right up at the nose, and that's just really great for stability when you are paddling, especially out in the surf or in bumpy conditions. You're going to notice that you are a lot more balanced when paddling. I love that it really pulls back into that narrower tail though to give it that more performance feel when you are surfing. The Spice, it is much narrower at 29 inches, but we still notice that the width in the nose is still there, and that gives it some great stability. It has a wing or a flyer toward the tail, and that creates a narrower outline in the back of the board. So when you are stepping back for a turn, you are using that smaller area on the board, which turns the board much quicker and much easier. The Pro, it keeps its width in the middle of the board, but really pulls in toward the nose and the tail. This is really the epitome of high performance surfing as you reduce the swing weight by having a narrower and thinner nose, and you get a really reactive board from the tail too. Taking a look at the rocker lines of the boards we have here today. Now, I must point out to start with that the rocker lines will change between the different sizes of boards as you move up or move down the range. And that's just because certain rocker lines don't work on smaller boards and certain rocker lines don't work on larger boards. So they need to find the right combination. So looking at the Wedge that we have, remember it is quite a flat rocker on this one. It does have a little bit of nose lift, a little bit of tail lift, but it stays fairly flat just to keep its paddle speed because it is quite a wide board. The Starboard Spice has a little bit more rocker to it, and we can see that it lifts up at the nose and at the tail, and that gives it really great performance in a tighter pocket when you are turning on the wave. Looking at the Starboard Pro, it is a fairly flattened out rocker compared to what we see on a lot of other Pro shapes. However, you notice it does have a little bit more than the Spice, which again just makes it perform in those steeper, hollower waves for high performance riding. One of the biggest areas where these boards differ is in their rail shape. Now, rail shape is super important on a surf SUP because you need to have the right amount of volume and also shape in the rail for it to perform in the surf. And of course, there have been a lot of different designs throughout the years. But let's go through these boards individually. Starting off with the Starboard Wedge. Now, the name of this board really came from that dropped off edge that you see on the rail. We notice a pretty flat deck, and then along the edges of these boards, it really drops off quite suddenly to create a thinner, lower profile rail. What that means is it's going to give you more bite and hold into the wave as you are surfing. If you have a really thick rail and you try to put that into the wave, it's just going to bounce right back out of the wave face because of all that volume. Unless you're a really strong, powerful, heavy set rider that can dig in a big rail. If you're that lighter weight rider or even under 90 kilograms, it's going to be really hard to dig in that big rail. So I really like the way that Starboard have designed the Wedge range because they have some bigger boards in their range, 32 inches wide, but still perform amazingly well. Looking at the Spice, it has a little bit of a domed deck, and this makes the rails a bit thinner for that added performance, as we mentioned before, like the Wedge. But what also helps the rail thin out on the Spice is the chine or the beveled rail underneath the board. This little angle change on the rail means that when you pick up speed, you're actually surfing on the narrower part of the board, which makes it more responsive on the wave. On the Starboard Pro, they do have a domed deck, however, they have flattened it out for 2023, but the rails are nice and pinched. They really roll off that edge of the rail to reduce the thickness and give the board more bite in the wave. So how do all of those design elements translate into the performance on the water and how it feels surfing? Oh, my favorite part of the video. So I started riding on the Starboard Wedge. It was on the fuller tide and I found that immediately I had great stability, like we've been speaking about. It paddles over waves really easily, and getting out the back, I never once felt like I needed to get on my knees or paddle prone over waves. I just seemed to be that really all-round stable board. What I will mention though is that because this board in particular is only 8 feet long, it felt a little bit slow to paddle and to get it moving. I did find that with the 8.7 wedge that we have reviewed as well, and you can check out that video on SUPboarder now. I did find that paddle a little bit slow as well, had a bit of an upturned rocker at the nose. So from what I'm getting from this board is that it's a little bit slower. I guess it's quite a wide board as well at 32 inches, so more width is going to equal more drag. Now, I will say that it caught just about every wave I paddled for. However, you really do need to be in the right position in the lineup with this board to catch your waves. If you are too far out, I felt like it just didn't have enough paddle power to get into those slower or smaller waves. But on the flip side, that extended nose rocker helps beginner riders drop into steeper waves when learning to SUP surf. But the on-wave performance from this short, compact shape was actually quite surprising. The smaller shape allows it to turn tighter in the pocket of the wave, and it carried speed throughout the turns. As you move up in size within the range, beginner surfers will really benefit from the added volume of the Wedge boards. It's also a great first board choice for shorter riders, as other boards on the market tend to be a bit longer at the same volume, which hinders your turning ability. I highly suggest that you tune into the SUPboarder Pro extended video that I do after this review to have a look and find out a few more details about the Starboard Wedge in that particular size of 8 feet and how it fits into the Starboard range, comparing it to a few other boards as well. So moving on to the Starboard Spice and the performance out in the waves. Well, when I first jumped on it, I immediately noticed the drop in stability when paddling out through waves. However, with that wider nose, I found that the balance was actually quite good when popping over waves and I didn't fall off when paddling out. The first wave I caught, the speed, control, and flow was all there on the Spice compared to the Wedge. It really connected, and I felt like this board was the right board to have in these types of conditions. My biggest takeaway from riding the Spice straight after riding the Wedge was just how much more technical it is to ride. It's definitely a big jump in kind of your ability level to be able to firstly balance on the board when paddling, but also surfing the board. It's way more reactive. It gives you much more feedback than the Wedge does. Wherever you put your foot, you kind of get the board to react in a certain way. So if you do step out of place, the board's probably not going to do what you really want it to do. So for that reason, beginner riders would definitely struggle on a board like the Spice because it's just too sensitive and advanced. However, if you have at least some surf experience as that kind of more advanced beginner or intermediate rider, then the Spice is a great choice for you. You'll be able to progress your surfing on this board because it's not as reactive as the Pro, which we'll speak about soon, and not as slow as the Wedge, so you get this perfect blend of technicality. Now moving on to the Pro shape from Starboard, the tide was dropping out at this point. My energy levels were dropping quite considerably, which didn't impact my thoughts and feedback for this video. However, it just made things a little bit more uncomfortable for me when I was paddling. As soon as I jumped on this board, I noticed that it is lacking that stability that we have from the Spice. And take into consideration, these boards are only 2 liters difference in their volume. So it's a really big thing to note about the shape of the board. We have this narrower nose compared to the Spice, which means you're going to lose that stability. And that was very noticeable. And the Pro from Starboard is just that other jump in sensitivity from the Spice, which means it's leaps and bounds ahead in terms of sensitivity and reaction time compared to the Wedge. And that just means you really have to be on your game when surfing the Starboard Pro. It was definitely the fastest board on the wave because of that reduced width and volume in the nose and rails, which means you need to be on it again in terms of identifying the next turn or next section that's coming up. Because as a more intermediate rider, you might miss a lot of opportunities if you don't have that experience of riding a faster board. It will take a little bit of getting used to, especially if you are that intermediate rider wanting to become advanced and surfing a little bit more radical. I had some great turns and the board felt nice and smooth, but like I said, that lack of energy that I had, I fell off quite a bit and had to prone paddle a lot as well. If you're not super fit, and obviously I'm not at the moment, being new dad, but if you're not super fit, it's going to be very hard for you to do extended sessions out on the water. I'd probably say looking at that hour limit, you'd be able to stand on the board for about an hour, and then as you start to go past that, you might getting a bit more fatigued with your energy levels, and you'll just notice yourself falling off a little bit. Maybe the session is going to become a bit more frustrating. Do keep that in mind. Maybe look at the Spice if you are a bit unfit, want to get back into SUP surfing, or feel like you need just a little bit more comfort when you are standing up waiting for waves. However, if you have the stamina, want to rip, shred, and tear the waves apart, then the Pro is for you. If you do floaters, top turns, maybe learning to get a bit more vertical and a bit more radical with your surfing, then definitely go for the Starboard Pro. Of course, I'll mention it again, all these boards come in different sizes, so do make sure you take a look at Starboard's website, take a look at the sizes they have on there, which one's going to suit you with the size, width, volume, all of that kind of stuff as well. And do ask us any questions if you need to. Now moving on from the on-water performance and speaking a little bit about the wave types that these boards are going to work in, one of the biggest kind of takeaways and talking points that I found in doing this review was that I was looking for different waves as I was riding each different type of board. For example, on the Wedge, on the 8-foot Wedge, I was looking for those smaller waves that had a quite a slopey face on them. I didn't want anything too steep because that rocker line is not going to fit into a wave that is quite steep. When we're looking at the Starboard Spice, I found that I could pretty much catch all different types of waves on that board. It's a really all-round great board. I think I likened it to a quiver killer in the previous review we've done of the Starboard Spice. And I really felt like I did that. I could catch just about the small waves up to the bigger waves, steeper waves, slower waves. I kind of felt like it was working in all those different types of conditions, which I think is really great in a board if you have, those different types of conditions. You have messy one day, then clean the next. I feel like if you want a board that can handle all of those, then the Spice is going to be the way forward. And then on the Pro, I was definitely looking for maybe not necessarily bigger waves, but just something that was a little bit steeper in its shape. And that way I could get the most speed out of it. Because riding a Pro board on a slower wave, you're not going to get the maximum performance benefits out of it. So based on that, I feel like if you are an advanced rider, you could definitely have the Pro and the Spice in your quiver of boards and be super happy with those two, because you can ride them in different conditions. When it's cleaner, bigger, hollower, steeper, take out the Pro. When it's maybe smaller or even still a bit of size on the wave, but maybe a bit bumpy, bit of wind chop, maybe the waves just are backing off a little bit in their power, jumped on the Spice. Again, if you just want one board, the Spice is a great board. And then the Wedge, I feel like you could ride that when the waves are nice and small, more of that cruisy, almost like a longboard feel. That's with this 8-foot version. As we move up, we'll review the 8'7" as well, as I've mentioned before. I feel like that is a board that can work in a range of different conditions too. I really hope I was able to bring you this review in quite an informative way that you're able to keep up, listen to all of our feedback on these boards. Just to quickly summarize, if you are riding the Wedge, it's going to give you that great stability, especially when you are learning to surf. And then as you jump on the Spice, it's going to be a lot more technical to ride. However, it's going to cover a lot of different types of conditions and also wave size and also ability level. And then jumping on the Pro, really suited to those higher performance riders wanting to get more radical, more vertical, surfing the board in more hollower waves and more steeper waves, or something with a bit more speed and power. If you do like our content, please do like, subscribe to our YouTube channel. It really helps us create more of a community so we can share these videos with more of you out there and just spread the word about SUPboarder. We bring you new videos each week about technique, about reviews on equipment, about interviews, anything to do with stand-up paddling, foiling, all of that stuff in stand-up paddling. We do it all. Thank you very much for tuning in to this video. We look forward to seeing you on another SUPboarder video very, very soon. If you have any questions, pop them in the comments below. Check out the SUPboarder Pro video about the Starboard Wedge.